Hello everyone, Vescom here. On the 20th of June, inXile Entertainment released their first VR game, Mage's Tale, which is a dungeon crawler style RPG. It is a timed exclusive for the Oculus Rift, so unfortunately 5 users can't play the game without the use of the revive hack quite yet. The game has great graphics that actually work really well in making you feel like you are exploring some kind of an old tomb, sewer system or dungeon. The enemies also look nice and they have good animations. The sound design is also great and it adds a lot to the feeling of actually being inside the dungeons. The only issue that actually somewhat bothered me with the presentation was that in some places there are some guardrays. Guardrays are caused by having really dark areas next to really bright areas on the screens inside the HMD, and to be honest, I'd be very surprised if someone managed to make a game like this without running into the guardray issue on the Rift. It is simply an issue with the lenses of the HMD. Thankfully, the effect wasn't too bad and it was easy enough to ignore during gameplay, at least for me. The game is set in the same game world as the Bard's Tale games, so it might be familiar to some. Personally, I have never played any game set in this universe, but enjoying the game doesn't really require any prior knowledge of the world anyway. The story is a very simple tale of you being an apprentice to a mage who gets kidnapped. Then you set out to find and free him from the evil wizard who took him. The mage's somewhat annoying familiar, Crux, also follows you around, and he helps you by providing some backstory on the environment and the characters, and by giving you tips for the puzzles that you have to solve for the main story. Mage's Tale is not an open world game or anything like that. The dungeons are separate and they are accessed by teleporting to them from the workshop through the teleporting device that kind of reminds me of a Stargate, although a much more simple version of it. The workshop consists of 3 different small areas. One area holds the collection of cages that you find during your adventure. Another area has some items you can play with, including some magical music bones that you can play. The main area holds the tablets that provide some audio for backstory, and of course the most important thing, the cauldron that you use to craft spells. More on that a bit later. The game's controls are quite simple. With a press of a button you open the spell selection square and you select the spell by moving your hand to one of the corners. You can only have one spell selected at a time, but you can choose which hand you want to use for casting. Another button creates a shield and you can create a shield for both hands. Early on you can also get an upgrade that allows you to combine the shields together into a bigger shield by moving your hands close to each other. The trigger button is used for charging and casting spells. The grip button is of course used for grabbing things, and as a mage you have telekinesis skills, so you don't have to bend over to grab things from the floor and so on. However, the grabbing interaction does have some issues with it. For example, opening chests can sometimes be a bit difficult due to the hand not snapping to the lid in a good way. Some other interactions can also be a bit awkward and clumsy due to the way this works. This is a fairly minor annoyance in the grand scheme of things, even though it is one of the most annoying issues the game has. The last part of the controls is moving around the world. The game offers 2 different locomotion styles. Assuming you use the right-handed control scheme, your right controller stick has 45 degrees snap turning when moved left and right. Pushing the stick forwards activates your standard VR blink teleporting. The left controller stick is where the more interesting option is. The stick has sort of a short directional teleporting movement. It is kind of like dashing a step or 2 in a direction. It allows you to dash forwards, backwards or strafing to your sides. In general, the standard teleporting allows you to move around the dungeons faster, but the dashing works really well in combat since it doesn't require targeting. I didn't experience any VR sickness from using it, and in general I really liked it. The The developers have also mentioned the possibility of adding smooth locomotion into the game in the future. The dungeons aren't just full of enemies for you to fight, there are also a lot of puzzles to solve and many of them are optional. There are a few different kinds of rewards for solving them. First, there are the two different kinds of collectibles, the tablets that play a short audio clip that provides a bit of story, and the gauges that have miniature versions of different characters and enemies in them. Examining the gauges in the workshop will also provide you with a related audio clip, like crooks explaining what the thing inside the cage is, or just an audio line from the thing inside. Another thing you collect are the ingredients for customizing your spells. Whenever you find a collectible item, your cute and friendly magical frog Fergus will appear and you throw the item in its mouth to transport it to the workshop. Before getting into the spell crafting, let's first go over the basic spells. All the basic spells are unlocked quite quickly in the beginning of the game. The first one is a basic fireball that recharges quickly and deals a low amount of damage. The second spell is a lighting spell that covers a big cone-shaped area and deals quite a lot of damage over its duration and can hit multiple enemies. The third spell is an ice lance that freezes enemies in a small area around its impact and deals quite a bit of damage. The last spell is a wind blast that will knock enemies back and it also deals damage to enemies that are behind their shields. The different types of spells are used for different puzzles, so generally speaking you will want to have one of each in your spell selection, even though it is technically possible to have two versions of the same spell with you. The spell crafting is done at the cauldron by pouring in the basic spell type from the respective jug and then throwing in the ingredients that you want to use to modify the spell. Once you've added the ingredients, you simply mix it and then the spell can be added to your spell selection. There are a lot of different effects you can add to the spells, and some of them are significantly more powerful than the others, while some might be more useful for some specific playstyles. The ingredients are taken from the 4 different racks. The orbs in the middle of the rack tell you the amount of budget the ingredients will use. Basically, you can use 1 ingredient from the 2 orb rack, or 2 ingredients from the 1 orb racks. There is also the 0 orb rack, which has cosmetic ingredients in it, like adding confetti to your spell or changing the spell's color. The 2 orb ingredients are greater effects, like greater damage boost and polymorph, which turns enemy into sheep for a short duration. The lesser effects are things like smaller damage boost, triple, which makes you shoot 3 projectiles instead of 1, while also making the spell recharge a bit slower, seeking, which makes the projectiles seek targets, and drunk, which makes the projectiles fly in an unpredictable way. In general, I found combining 2 of the lesser effects to provide more powerful spells, but it really also depends on which spell ingredients you find and what your playstyle is. Some crafted spells can also become incredibly powerful, and the spells you use make a huge difference in the game's difficulty level. There was this one spell I crafted during the first half of the game that changed the game from being reasonably challenging to a fairly easy experience. I think one of the effects on that spell should have been made into a greater effect instead of being a lesser effect, which allowed me to combine it with the bonus damage, that then turned the spell into what really felt like an overpowered spell. On the other hand, the spell crafting is one of the most fun things I've experienced in VR, and figuring out the overpowered spells kind of just makes it more fun. There is a reasonable amount of enemy variety in the game. The more basic enemies shoot you with their bows or try to attack you in melee with swords. Most of the melee enemies have shields, but the berserkers use two-handed swords instead. There are also mages that levitate in the air and cast spells at you, and suicide bombers that just run towards you and explode if they get too close. Through the campaign you fight goblins, 2 different types of skeletons, and berserkers that seem like humans. There are also some boss fights, like for example a giant. The combat and opening chests provide mage stones, which are essentially a form of XP that gives you levels. When you gain a level, you can choose between 2 different upgrades for your character. The basic options are extra health or recharge speed for your spells. There are also a few more unique upgrades, which are the combined shield, making the shield reflective, the 4th spell slot, and an extra potion slot on your belt. The maximum level is 15, and at that point you will unlock the last remaining upgrade, so at that point all players will have the same upgrades. I decided to go for the more unique bonuses whenever possible and maximizing my spell recharge speed before going for the extra health. I think taking 1 or 2 of the health upgrades a bit earlier might have been a good idea, but the spell recharge speed certainly was very useful thing to have. So, are there any real negatives about the game? Well, crooks, the familiar, can at times be extremely annoying. Like for example, one time I wanted to craft a new spell and test it out on the target dummy goblin, but crooks just kept repeating that we should move to the next dungeon every couple of seconds. The game also has fairly long load times, although they seem to get slightly better on later play sessions. So if you decide to buy the game, I definitely recommend closing and restarting the game if you experience long loading times when you first launch the game. It might help. All in all, Mage's Tale is a great and polished VR game. It isn't perfect, but it is easily one of the best VR games I've ever played, and it is definitely the best dungeon crawler out there. It took me about 9 hours to beat the game, which I think is a reasonable length for a game like this, at this price point, which is 40 euros or dollars. So if you are into this game genre, or actually even if you aren't, I'd highly recommend Mage's Tale, because it really is one of the best VR games out there.
I had a little tuttle and I fell into the bottle, and I thought my life was shuttle cause the bottle was full. But then I got to thinking, if I just keep on drinking, I'll save myself from sinking, so I drank it all down. Throw in a bottle, thought he might drown. Throw in a bottle, but he drank it all down. Throw in a bottle, thought he might drown. Throw in a bottle, but he drank it all down. So I drank it to the bottom, then I had another problem, cause down there at the bottom I couldn't reach the top. So I thank you very kindly for your rescue, also timely, cause if you didn't find me, I'd still be in the choke. Throw in a bottle, thought he might drown. Throw in a bottle, but he thought he might drown. Throw in a bottle, thought he might drown. Throw in a bottle, but he drank it all down.
Well, that was rustic.